The snow had been falling since morning, soft and steady, like it had nowhere else to be. Maple Hollow was quiet now, just a hum of distant power lines, and the occasional bark of a dog echoing down the hill, inside a modest brown house near the edge of town. Thomas Ray sat at his kitchen table, fiddling with the radio dial. Static. A burst of brass. Then silence. He didn't mind. Silence had become its own kind of company. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and old pine. A single stovetop coil glowed orange, casting long shadows across the linoleum. Thomas wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His hands were thick and weathered, the kind that remembered every wrench they'd ever held. On the windowsill behind him sat a photo of Ruth, smiling, eyes half closed, caught mid-laugh. He hadn't moved in 10 years. There was no tree in the corner, no garland on the mantel, just a calendar on the wall. His red square around December 24th was more like a warning than a celebration. A knock broke the quiet. Thomas stood slowly, joints stiff from the cold. He opened the door to find Ellie from next door, bundled in a red coat, her cheeks pink and her breath puffing like steam.
Mama says everyone's going to the church tonight,
she said, holding a paper bag in one mittened hand.
Pastor James is reading the Christmas story. There'll be cider and singing.
Thomas raised an eyebrow.
I've got cider here.
Ellie shrugged.
It's not the same if you drink it alone.
He looked at her for a moment, then glanced past her at the snow-covered street.
That's nice of you, but I don't go to church anymore.
She didn't argue. Just smiled, soft and sure.
Well, maybe Christmas'll come find you anyway.
Thomas didn't answer. He just nodded once, slow and polite, and closed the door. Later, when he stepped out to bring in firewood, he saw the candle. It sat on the porch railing, nestled in a ring of pine needles. No note. No fuss. Just a small, simple thing waiting to be lit. Evening crept closer, and the sun dipped low behind the hills. In the distance, the church stood like a candle in the snow, its windows glowing amber in the dwindling light, steeple dusted white. Thomas watched it from his kitchen window, arms folded, the radio still silent. Then the phone rang, its sharp trill cutting through the quiet like a nail through wood. He let it ring twice before picking up.
Ray residence?
Thomas is James. Sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve. Thomas leaned against the counter, watching the snow thicken outside.
What's wrong?
The fresh out of church is going out. We're going to have the town here already. We have blankets, candles, and carols, but it's getting cold fast.
Thomas rubbed his temple.
I tried telling you last winter. That thing was on its last leg.
I know, but you built it. You're the only one who knows how to coax it back.
Thomas hesitated. He hadn't stepped inside that church since Ruth's funeral. Hadn't seen Daniel in nearly as long. But the thought of children shivering in pews, of old Mrs. Langford wrapped in 2 coats and still shaking, it stirred something.
I'll be there in 20,
he said, and hung up. He grabbed his tools and stepped toward the door. As he reached for the knob, his eyes landed on the candle still sitting on the porch railing. He paused. Then, without a word, he picked it up and tucked it into his toolbox. The church sat at the center of Maple Hollow, like a lantern in the snow. Its steeple rose above the rooftops, and the windows glowed with candlelight. Thomas parked his truck beside the cemetery fence and stepped out, toolbox in hand. Inside, the sanctuary was warm with voices. Children sang Christmas hymns in soft, uneven harmony. Blankets were draped over pews. The smell of cider and pine filled the air. Thomas moved quickly, nodding to Pastor James, but avoiding eye contact with the crowd. He slipped through the side door and down into the basement, where the old furnace sat like a sleeping bear. He knelt beside it, listening to the rhythm of its breath. It was wheezing. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Thomas didn't look up.
I didn't expect you to come.
Said a voice behind him. He knew it before he turned. Daniel stood at the bottom step, hands in his coat pockets, eyes cautious.
Didn't expect to get asked.
Thomas said, tightening a bolt. They stood in silence, the hum of the furnace filling the space between them. Thomas worked for nearly an hour. Replaced the fuse, cleaned the intake, rewired the ignition. The pilot light flickered once, then died. Again. And again. He sat back on his heels, rubbing his hands together. They ached. Not from the cold, but from the years. The furnace wasn't just old. It was tired. Like him. He looked up at Daniel, who hadn't moved.
Is no good.
Thomas said.
She's done.
Daniel nodded slowly.
We have blankets inside her. We'll manage.
Thomas stood, brushed off his knees, and followed his son up the stairs. The sanctuary was warm, with voices and soft light. Overhead, the bulbs glowed steady, casting a golden hue across the pews and garland-strung windows. Thomas stood near the back, arms folded, watching the flickering candles on the windowsills. The furnace was dead. He'd done all he could, but the church hadn't emptied. If anything, it had grown warmer, though not from heat. Pastor James stepped to the pulpit, Bible in hand. His voice was steady, low, like he was speaking to each person individually.
And the angels answered them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy.
Thomas closed his eyes. He knew the passage by heart. Ruth used to read it every Christmas Eve, sitting by the fire, her voice soft and sure. Daniel would curl up beside her, one sock always missing, asking if the shepherds had names. He opened his eyes and looked toward the choir. Daniel stood near the back, holding a candle, his face half lit. He wasn't singing, just listening. Ellie was seated near the front, legs swinging, her red coat draped over the pew. She turned and spotted Thomas, then gave a small wave. Nothing showy, just a quiet acknowledgement. He nodded back. Thomas stepped forward, slow and unsure. He set his toolbox down beside the vestibule and opened it. Nestled between pliers and wire was the candle Ellie had left on his porch. He hadn't meant to bring it, but he had. He lit it from one of the windowsill flames and held it in both hands. Daniel watched, then walked over. They stood in silence for a moment, the candlelight between them.
I kept your letter.
Thomas said quietly.
Just didn't know what to say.
Daniel nodded.
You don't need to say anything. Just that you'll stay.
Thomas looked around the room. Neighbors, children, old friends bundled in coats, warmed by something more than heat.
I will.
He said. The choir began Silent Night. The flame between them flickered once, then steadied. Thomas turned to Pastor James.
Where are the blankets?
In the closet by the vestibule.
He moved quickly, returning with armfuls. One to Mrs. Langford, one to the Jenkins twins, one to the young mother with the sleeping baby. Daniel helped him. No words needed. And then, just as Thomas handed out the last blanket, a low hum filled the room. The furnace kicked back to life. Gasps, laughter, a few claps. Pastor James looked up, smiling. Thomas stood still, hands empty, heart full. The warmth spread slowly, like sunrise. Not just through the vents, but through him. The snow was still falling when Thomas pulled into his driveway, the candle from the church flickering gently in the cup holder. He left his toolbox in the truck, but brought the candle inside, setting it on the windowsill beside Ruth's photo. He stood there for a moment, watching the flame reflect in the glass. Then he turned toward the kitchen. The table hadn't seen company in years, but maybe soon it would. The house was still. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the calendar on the wall. December 25th. A red square. A date that used to mean something. He reached for the photo of Daniel as a boy. Missing sock, crooked grin, arms full of wrapping paper, and held it for a long time. Outside, the morning light began to rise, pale and golden. The candle caught it, glowing faintly in the glass. Then came a knock. Thomas stood slowly, unsure. He opened the door to find Daniel, holding a pie.
Merry Christmas.
Daniel said. Thomas blinked, then stepped aside.
Come in.
He said.
I wasn't expecting something this morning.
Behind Daniel stood Ellie and her mother, arms full of warm rolls, and a Christmas ham. Ellie grinned.
We brought the good stuff.
Pastor James followed with a jug of cider and a grin.
And I brought plenty of cider to drink.
They filled the kitchen with warmth and laughter. Mismatched chairs were pulled in from every room. The candle stayed on the windowsill, quiet, now with the flame unlit. The candle had gone out, but Christmas found its way back.